Get out of here, Khalid's voice thundered, echoing against the marble walls of his villa. His hand slashed through the air with contempt, his face hard with fury. You dare shame me with that? Get out and take that child with you. I never want to see either of you again. Mariam stood frozen for a moment, her arms wrapped protectively around her swollen belly. Her lips trembled, her eyes wide with both fear and heartbreak. She whispered something soft, almost a plea, but the sound was swallowed in silence. Khalid did not waver. He turned his back on her, his flowing white robes swaying with the motion, his pride shielding him from the reality of what he was casting away. The heavy doors swung open, and the desert wind rushed in, sharp and unrelenting. Mariam stepped barefoot into the brightness, the villa shrinking behind her with every slow step. Guards closed the doors with finality. In that moment her life had changed forever. She had entered the house as a servant and now left as an outcast, carrying the weight of both her shame and her unborn child. Inside, Khalid returned to his polished life as if nothing had happened. He believed he had erased her with a single command. What he did not know was that his words would echo back one day, louder than he could ever imagine. The early 1980s in the Gulf were years of enormous wealth. Oil fortunes built palaces that glittered in the desert Sunday. Among those who thrived was Khalid, a man raised in luxury, accustomed to absolute control. His villa was a monument to excess. Italian marble lined every hall. Crystal chandeliers glimmered from ceilings imported from Europe. Fountains flowed endlessly as if water itself was his to command. To the world, Khalid was charm and power, a man whose name carried weight in boardrooms and lavish banquets. To those who worked in his home, he was unpredictable, exacting, and merciless. Mariam had entered this world quietly. She was young, barely more than a girl, arriving from Africa through an agency that promised her family she would send money home. Her village had been broken by drought. Her family had no fields left to farm. She said goodbye to her mother, with the promise she would return with enough to lift them from poverty. The reality was scrubbing endless floors, polishing furniture already gleaming, and existing as a shadow in a house that never slept. Khalid rarely looked at the maids, but eventually he noticed Mariam. Perhaps it was her youth. Perhaps it was the way her eyes revealed a quiet strength. What began as lingering glances turned into gestures, questions asked in a softened tone. Mariam, unused to such attention, felt confusion more than flattery. She had come to work, not to be singled out. Yet in a house where power decided every boundary, her will mattered little. One evening, boundaries were crossed. Mariam carried the secret in silence, praying that somehow she might escape notice. But as weeks passed, her secret grew visible. Khalid's reaction was not shock, but outrage. The thought of scandal, of whispers among his peers, drove him into a fury. He would not risk his name, his reputation, his empire. The child, he decided, could not exist in his world. That was why on that merciless afternoon he had spat those words, forcing Mariam out into the desert heat. She wandered, broken yet determined. The money she had saved was barely enough to rent a single room, shared with other women who had met similar fates. She worked wherever she could, scrubbing kitchens, washing clothes, cooking in stifling restaurants. Her body ached, her hands cracked and raw, but each day she endured because within her grew the one thing she could not abandon. When the time came, Mariam gave birth to a son. She named him Adam. The first time she held him, her tears fell freely, soaking the blanket that wrapped him. He was both her sorrow and her strength. Alone in a foreign land, with no family, no protection, she swore to him that he would never feel worthless. She would bear the burden so that he could walk tall. Meanwhile, Khalid moved on, as if nothing had happened. His villa hosted glittering parties, his businesses multiplied, his name adorned investments across cities. If anyone whispered about the maid who had once lived under his roof, he dismissed it with a laugh. She was ungrateful, he said. She had run away. His pride wove lies easily, and he believed them because it was easier than admitting truth. But time has a way of unveiling what pride seeks to bury. Adam was growing. Each day his presence in the world became harder to ignore. Khalid had cast Mariam out, but he had not erased her. He had not erased the child. And in years to come, the very existence of that child would shake the foundations of everything Khalid thought untouchable. This was only the beginning. Mariam's silence would not last forever. Her endurance, her sacrifices, would one day unfold into a story that would return Khalid's cruelty to his own doorstep, sharper and more devastating than he could ever imagine. The years passed slowly for Mariam. Yet for Adam each day was a step forward into a world that seemed determined to keep him small. The boy was quick with numbers and questions, always searching for patterns in the simplest things. When other children played in the streets, Adam would sit with a piece of chalk, scratching out sums and shapes on broken stone. Mariam encouraged him as best she could. She saved what little she earned to buy second-hand books, their pages worn thin, their covers bent, yet to Adam they were treasures. He grew in the shadow of poverty, but Mariam raised him with dignity. She reminded him daily that his worth was not tied to the cracks in their walls or the patched clothes he wore. She taught him to stand straight, to speak clearly, to respect himself even when others did not. Still, whispers surrounded them. Neighbors gossiped. Children mocked. They called him a child without a father, a boy without a name. Each word stung, but Mariam's steady gaze gave him strength. One day, she told him, they will know you not by what you lack, but by what you have built. Adam worked harder than anyone else. In school he outperformed the children of wealth who arrived in polished cars with drivers. Teachers noticed his discipline, his sharp memory, his ability to solve problems others struggled with. He began to attract attention, first with small scholarships, then with larger opportunities. Yet each step forward reminded Mariam of the truth she had hidden. She had never told Adam who his father was. She feared that knowledge would plant bitterness in his heart too early. But deep inside, she knew the day was coming when silence would no longer protect him. While Adam pushed toward the future, Khalid remained enthroned in his empire. His companies expanded into banking and real estate. His name was printed in glossy magazines. He attended banquets in halls filled with gold chandeliers, where leaders toasted his success. His children lived in abundance, educated abroad, shielded from the struggles of ordinary life. To Khalid, power was permanent, unshakable. He did not once think of the maid he had cast aside. He did not imagine that the boy she carried was growing into a man with the intellect and ambition to one day walk into his world uninvited. It was in Adam's final year at university that fate began to weave its threads tightly. A prestigious firm in the city launched a competitive program for young talent, seeking analysts to join a major restructuring project. Adam, with his top marks and his relentless drive, won a place. The work was grueling, but he thrived. Numbers bent easily beneath his mind. His managers quickly trusted him with sensitive files, some of which connected to Khalid's empire. Adam did not yet know the name would one day define his own life. Mariam watched quietly as Adam grew taller, stronger, his eyes sharper. She carried the weight of memory alone. Sometimes late at night, she pulled out the small box she had kept hidden for decades. Inside were fragments of her past. A few notes Khalid had written, small gifts once given in secrecy, receipts that bore his name. Each piece was proof of the truth. She had kept them not out of longing but as protection, a shield in case her son ever needed to know. Her hands trembled each time she touched them. She wondered how long she could wait before revealing the truth. Then came the evening when Adam arrived home with a file in hand, his expression tight with disbelief. He spread the papers across the small wooden table. Numbers filled the pages, figures that told a story of money hidden in offshore accounts, of transfers disguised to avoid scrutiny, of corruption lurking beneath Khalid's glittering empire. Adam leaned forward, eyes narrowed. This man, he said, has built everything on lies. Mariam's heart pounded. She recognized the name immediately. Khalid al-Mansour. The man who had destroyed her life, the man Adam did not yet know was his father. She sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the documents that now tied her son to the past she had fought so hard to bury. Then she knew the time had come. She could not allow Adam to uncover the truth by accident. She owed him honesty. That night, she told him everything. She told him about the villa, the marble floors, the chandeliers, the man who had used her and cast her aside. She told him about the day she stood at those massive doors, heavy with child, and heard Khalid's voice cut her down. She told him he was not just any man, but Adam's father. The room went silent. Adam's jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on a point beyond her. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. For a moment Miriam feared anger would consume him. But when he finally spoke, his voice was steady, controlled, sharpened like steel. "He thought he erased us," Adam said. "But he will see. He will know exactly what he threw away." Was Stilder, the quiet boy who had once drawn equations in chalk, had become a man carrying both brilliance and fury. Miriam saw in him not only her son, but the reflection of every injustice they had endured. For the first time, she believed that the balance of power might one day shift. Khalid had buried the past under layers of wealth and arrogance, but Adam now held the key to unearthing it. And that was how the stage was set. The father who had cast his blood into the streets was about to meet the son he had denied. Not as a beggar, not as a servant, but as the one person who could dismantle his empire from within. The plan took shape slowly, methodically, like a chess game played across months. Adam studied every corner of Khalid's empire, with the patience of someone who understood that revenge, when served properly, required precision. He analyzed financial records, mapped subsidiary companies, traced money flows that wound through shell corporations and foreign banks. What he discovered made him smile grimly. Khalid's fortune was built on more than oil wealth. It was sustained by tax evasion, bribery, and contracts secured through political connections that skirted the edges of legality. The young analyst had become a hunter, and his prey had no idea the trap was being set. Adam's position at the firm gave him access to sensitive information, but more importantly, it gave him credibility. His colleagues respected his analytical mind, his ability to uncover patterns others missed. When he began preparing a comprehensive report on financial irregularities within several Gulf companies, no one questioned his motives. They saw a brilliant young man doing exceptional work. They did not see a son preparing to destroy his father. Miriam watched the transformation with a mixture of pride and concern. Adam's eyes had grown colder, more calculating. He worked late into the night, surrounded by papers and spreadsheets, his mind churning through strategies. Sometimes she would find him staring at old photographs of Khalid's villa that he had obtained through public records, his expression unreadable. She worried that revenge would consume him, but she also understood some wounds cut too deep to heal without justice. "Be careful," she would whisper as she brought him tea. "Do not let hatred poison what you are building." Adam would look up at her, his eyes softening for just a moment. "I won't become like him, Mama, but he needs to face what he did, not just to us, but to others." Because that was what Adam had discovered in his research. They were not alone. Over the years, Khalid had left a trail of discarded women and forgotten children, servants dismissed without cause, business partners betrayed, workers cheated of wages. The man who projected power and respectability had built his empire on the backs of the vulnerable, and each time he had counted on their silence, their inability to fight back. But silence has limits, and Adam was about to shatter Khalid's carefully constructed world. The first move came 6 months later. Adam's report on financial irregularities had been completed and submitted to the appropriate authorities. But before the investigation could begin, he arranged for key findings to be leaked to financial journalists. The initial articles were careful, citing unnamed sources, but they asked pointed questions about offshore accounts and unusual money transfers. Khalid's name appeared alongside other prominent businessmen, just one figure in a broader story about tax avoidance in the Gulf. For now, it was merely uncomfortable publicity, but Adam knew that discomfort would grow into crisis. The second move was more personal. Adam had spent months cultivating relationships with former employees of Khalid's companies, men and women who had been wronged but never had a voice. He helped them organize, provided legal guidance, connected them with journalists. Soon, stories began emerging about unsafe working conditions, unpaid wages, and systematic exploitation. The press painted a picture of a man whose wealth had been built on the suffering of others. Khalid began to notice the attacks. He hired the best public relations firms, deployed lawyers to silence critics, called in favors from politicians and media owners. But the stories kept coming, each one chipping away at his reputation. His business associates grew nervous. Investment partners began asking difficult questions. Still, Khalid did not know who was orchestrating his downfall. He suspected business rivals, perhaps political enemies. It never occurred to him that the architect of his destruction was a young man he had cast into the desert 25 years earlier. The final phase began when Adam decided it was time to reveal himself. He had been hired as a consultant for a major financial restructuring project, one that involved Khalid's primary holding company. The irony was perfect. Khalid had unknowingly invited his own son into the heart of his empire. Adam worked quietly for weeks, earning the trust of senior executives, demonstrating his expertise, positioning himself as indispensable to the project's success. Then he requested a meeting with Khalid himself. The appointment was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in Khalid's executive suite, 40 floors above the city. Adam arrived precisely on time, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, carrying a leather briefcase. The receptionist led him through halls lined with expensive art, past windows that offered commanding views of the city below. Everything was designed to intimidate, to remind visitors of the power they were entering. Adam felt no intimidation. He felt only the cold satisfaction of a plan reaching its culmination. Khalid sat behind a massive desk, carved from rare wood, his white hair perfectly groomed, his expression conveying the bored confidence of a man accustomed to absolute control. He glanced up as Adam entered, his eyes taking in the young consultant with mild interest. "Mr. Hassan," Khalid said, using the surname Adam had chosen for himself years earlier. "I'm told you have some concerns about our financial structures." Adam set his briefcase on the chair beside him and opened it slowly. He withdrew a thick folder and placed it on the desk. "I have more than concerns, Mr. Al-Mansour. I have proof of systematic fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering spanning 2 decades. Khalid's expression shifted slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Those are serious allegations, young man. I hope you have evidence to support them." "I do." Adam opened the folder, revealing page after page of financial records, bank statements, and wire transfer documents. 37 offshore accounts in 12 countries. False invoicing to hide profits. Bribes disguised as consulting fees. Your empire is built on criminal activity, and now the authorities know it. The color began to drain from Khalid's face as he flipped through the documents. These were records he thought were safely hidden. Transactions buried under layers of corporate complexity. "How did you? Who are you?" Adam reached into his briefcase again and withdrew a second folder. This one contained older documents, employment records from 25 years ago, medical records from a clinic, and several photographs. He spread them across the desk like playing cards. "My name is Adam Khalil Hassan," he said quietly. "My mother is Mariam Hassan. She worked in your villa from 1998 to 1999. You may remember her." Khalid's eyes widened as he stared at the photographs. There was Mariam as a young woman, barely 20, wearing the simple dress of a household servant. There was a medical record from a clinic confirming pregnancy. There was an employment termination notice dated the exact day Khalid had thrown her into the desert. "You," Khalid whispered, the word barely audible. "Yes," Adam replied. "The child you ordered out of your sight. The son you denied. I'm here to collect a debt that's been accumulating interest for 25 years. The silence stretched between them, heavy with recognition and dawning horror. Khalid looked at Adam's face with new eyes, searching for familiar features. The strong jaw, the intelligent eyes, the bearing that suggested absolute confidence. They were reflections of his own younger self, mixed with something else. Something harder, more determined than Khalid had ever been. "What do you want?" Khalid asked finally, his voice hollow. Adam smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Justice. You thought you could erase us with a word, cast us aside like garbage. You built your fortune while my mother scrubbed floors to keep us alive. You attended galas while I studied by candlelight because we couldn't afford electricity. You raised your legitimate children in luxury while your bastard son grew up hungry." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "But I didn't stay hungry. I got strong. I got educated. I got smart enough to see through every lie you've told, every crime you've committed. And now I'm going to watch your world collapse, brick by brick." Khalid tried to summon his old authority. "You can't destroy me, boy. I have connections, power, lawyers." "Had," Adam corrected. "Your political allies are distancing themselves as we speak." Your business partners are reconsidering their relationships. Your banks are freezing accounts. The investigation I triggered will be front-page news tomorrow morning. He stood and began collecting the documents. By the end of the week, your assets will be frozen. By the end of the month, you'll be facing criminal charges. Your legitimate children will inherit nothing but scandal and debt. Khalid rose from his chair, his face flushed with rage and panic. You're making a mistake. You can still what? Adam's voice cut like ice. Throw me out? Cast me aside? You already did that, remember? 25 years ago, you told my pregnant mother to get out and take that child with her. Well, that child grew up, and now, he's come home. The old man's legs seemed to give out beneath him. He sank back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. The commanding presence, the aura of untouchable power, it all crumbled in an instant. Adam walked to the window and looked out over the city. My mother wanted me to hate you, he said without turning around. For years, she carried the pain of what you did to her. But I realized something hating you would have given you power over my life. Instead, I chose to surpass you. He turned back to face Khalid. I'm not here for your money or your recognition. I'm here to ensure that justice finally catches up with you. Every person you've wronged, every life you've damaged, they all deserve better than your continued success. Khalid tried one last desperate appeal. I was young, foolish. I can make amends. Provide for you. 25 years too late, Adam replied. Your money is tainted. I want nothing from you, except to see you face the consequences of your choices. He closed his briefcase and walked toward the door. The news will break tomorrow. I suggest you use today to prepare your family. They're going to need time to adjust to their new circumstances. As Adam reached the door, Khalid called out one final time. Wait, at least tell me. How is she? Your mother? Adam paused, his hand on the doorknob. For a moment, his expression softened almost imperceptibly. She's a better person than you ever deserved to know. She raised me with dignity, with strength, with values you clearly never understood. She survived what you did to her and built something beautiful from the wreckage. He opened the door. That's more than you'll ever be able to say about your own life. The next morning, headlines across the city screamed of financial scandal and corruption. Khalid's empire began its rapid collapse, just as Adam had predicted. Within weeks, criminal charges were filed. Assets were seized. The man who had once commanded respect and fear found himself abandoned by allies and facing the prospect of spending his final years in prison. Mariam read the news reports with quiet satisfaction. Her son had kept his promise. He had not allowed hatred to poison him, but he had ensured that justice prevailed. The boy who had drawn equations in chalk had become a man capable of rewriting the equations of power itself. Adam returned home that evening to find his mother waiting with tea and a gentle smile. They sat together in their small apartment, the same space where she had raised him, with nothing but love and determination. It's finished, he said simply. No, Mariam replied, taking his hand. It's just beginning. You've closed one chapter, but now you can write the rest of your story freely, without the shadow of the past. Before we wrap this story up, I'd like to thank you for reaching this far. And if you enjoyed this story as much as I think you did, then be sure to show your support by liking and subscribing to this channel. Now back to the story. Years later, long after Khalid's conviction and imprisonment, long after the last appeals had been denied and the final assets distributed to those he had wronged, Adam would reflect on the strange circularity of justice. The man who had tried to erase him had instead created him, forged him in poverty and abandonment into something stronger than wealth could ever produce. The desert wind that had blown Mariam from Khalid's door had carried with it the seeds of his own destruction. In casting out his son, he had unknowingly set in motion the forces that would one day return to claim everything he thought untouchable. Some debts, it turned out, could never be escaped. They only grew with time, accumulating interest until the day of reckoning finally arrived.